let's do a deep dive into the two sessions and China's future. For insight, let's turn to Sourabh Gupta. He's a senior Asia-Pacific policy specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies, which is a think tank here in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with the backdrop for the two sessions, which of course is this fraught relationship between Washington and Beijing. How would you describe the U.S.-China relationship at this important juncture in time?
I would say it's at this juncture, there's a certain wariness on both sides. The U.S. is coming out aggressively, this new administration, and China is watching and waiting. There's anxiety, but there's also a desire to stay resolute and firm and pursue its own interests within this framework. So there's a wariness and watchfulness going on at this point of time, and that's where I would put it as to where the two countries are right now.
Okay, give us the lens from the United States. What will you be watching for during the two sessions? What are some of the key issues you think people in the West will be focused on?
What folks in the West will be looking at is how robustly is the Chinese government willing to stimulate the economy? There has been disinflation for a fair amount of time. Is the Chinese government really going to stimulate the economy? They did have a number of stimulus measures towards the latter part of last year. How much will those stimulus measures be continued into this year? And part of that has to do with the fact that what is going to be China's budget deficit this year. Usually that is a useful signal in terms of where China is going, also in terms of what is the amount of special treasury bonds, long-dated treasury bonds, and special purpose bonds. The other area I think that there will be, the West will be looking at is, are there signals in terms of how China is trying to manage its trade relationship with the United States, and what potential countermeasures also there might be. And in this context, how is China going about self-strengthening itself? How is it going about reforming many of those reforms which were laid out at the third plenum last July? What is China doing on that front? So it's these three areas in terms of how China is going to domestically grow and how it's going to cope with the consequences of the impending trade and investment war and technology competition is what I think folks in the West will be looking at.
Yeah, you mentioned growth. I know from covering the two sessions in the past that all eyes there, the Great Hall of the People, are fixated on the projections for China's growth in the year ahead. What can we expect on that front?
I think it's going to be a repeat of what was said last year and what was attained at the end of the year, which is about 5% growth. I think China's economy is going to do significant reform, but reform must not be at the expense of growth. There must be stability and growth going forward. And so they will try to hit that target of 5%. They will lay it out, try to hit that target, provide, I think, reasonably aggressive macroeconomic stimulus in order to hit that target. And in that context, do the various reforms which have been listed out within that third plenum document. We can go into them, but I mean, it's a plethora of reforms, big and small, and at the same time, then thereafter try to cope with the impending trade war that is about to break out, frankly.
And there's also this race for the future with the U.S. and China trying to forge their futures in this ever-changing environment. What do you expect to hear on that front?
I expect to hear on that front specifically, the Chinese government has talked in terms of issuing these long-dated treasury bonds. These are central government bonds. These are bonds which will thereafter be utilized to bolster the new quality productive forces and enhance the value addition and the technological sharpness and capability of private and non-private players in the Chinese economy. So one is, we are looking for to what extent are what amount of bonds are going to be issued, what sort of projects are they going to be provided for, national projects which have been talked about, and therefore I think that will be the central focus in terms of how is China trying to build out these new quality productive forces. So I think there's much to pay attention on that front, because China is moving from high speed growth to high quality growth, and this must become the new growth driver for China going forward.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. Sourabh Gupta, always appreciate your insights. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.